Hello and welcome to a new watercolor video. Today I'm going to paint this and I'm going to do it step by step if you want to follow along. You can download the outline on my Patreon, that's free. So if you don't want to draw the mushrooms yourself, you can just get this and trace it onto your paper. I'm using Archie's watercolor paper, I'm using Winsor & Newton watercolor paints, and everything else I'll list below in the description of the video. Okay, so I've applied masking fluid to where all the little white dots are going to be, and then those dots will stay nice and white until we take the masking fluid off. So I'm going to mix up some paint. Now I'm going to use Winsor & Newton paints today. I'm going to start with the top part of the mushroom, which is going to be red, but I want to get some yellow colour in there, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange and some red. So I'm just going to pick a yellow. I'll just pick this Winsor yellow. It's a nice warm yellow. We don't need much, just a little bit of that. Just use whatever brand of paints you have. I'm going to use some of this nice Winsor orange, which is a lovely bright orange. And I'm going to use Winsor red. Okay, so I'm going to start by wetting the whole of the mushroom cap first of all. So I'm using a small mop brush for this, just to quickly get the water on there. So we're going to build this up in layers. I'm actually going to take the water down to the inside, the underneath of the cap, but not the stalk. Now I'm going to get some of the yellow colour. I'm going to drop it in along here. That's a little bit too much. Didn't really want that much. I'm also going to just drop just a few little bits underneath as well. And get some orange. So strong, this colour, really strong. I'm going to kind of take that around the outside, just taking that around the outside but leaving a little bit of yellow highlight there. I mean, a lot of this is going to be covered up with red. Just drop a few little bits here, and I'm going to get the red and go right around the outside. Just a little bit across the rim. And then we want this side all red. And then we're going to go across the bottom here, just to create a little edge there. This is super strong. It's ages since I've used the Winsor & Newton paints, and it is super strong. You don't need much at all. I'm actually going to make up a little bit of permanent alizarin crimson and just drop a few little bits of that in here and there. So I've just cleaned my brush, and so I've just got a damp clean brush, and I'm just going to lift out a little bit of that where it's bled down. It doesn't matter too much because we're going to be putting like a brown colour under here. And then I'm just going to do the same for the rest of the mushroom caps. going to dry that layer off with the heat gun. Okay, so I'm going to add another layer on this one and drop in some more intense red. So I'm going to wet just the top of the cap, just the top area this time. And I'm going to get some of that really bright Winsor red and kind of drop that in the middle area. Maybe a little bit across the bottom here. Now I do want to add some darker red on this, but I don't want to drop it wet in wet because it'll just spread out. So I'm going to dry this off and then we'll do another little wet layer over the top to add some little shaded areas. Okay, so again wetting the whole of the top area. I'm going to get some of that Alizarin crimson and I'm going to mix that with some indigo. I'm just going to drop a few little patches here and there, like maybe some there, not much. I want it to kind of look like there's some little, you know, uneven dents in the mushroom cap. And then we'll wet all this one as well. And then get some of that dark colour and drop some in there in this side of this one so it looks like there's a little bit of shading to this side. So this cap is creating a shadow on here. Just kind of over to this area. Next I'm going to use this little tiny mini rigger brush and I'm just going to do wet on dry, so just getting a little bit of orange paint on the brush and I'm just going to add some little lines like this, just to add a little bit of texture to the mushroom. So I'll do some orange bits, some of the red will go right across the bottom with the bright Winsor red, or just the brightest red that you've got. We'll go around the edge. Just want to add just a few little, it's not really showing up, but maybe just a few little, just little marks and scratches here and there, just to give it a bit of an uneven look. And maybe get some of that darker colour, a little bit of the darker colour, the dark mix that I made, and paint a little bit underneath the dots so it looks like a little shadow underneath them. And then again just add some, maybe some random details, just a few little red bits here. Okay, I'm going to make sure that's all fully dry and then we'll take the masking fluid off. So this is a rubber cement eraser. If you haven't seen one before, it's excellent for picking up masking fluid. It just literally grabs it and pulls it off. Okay, so that's what the spots look like with the masking fluid off, and it's just very harsh, it looks unrealistic. And in reality there wouldn't be pure white, so we're going to add lots of shadowing onto the spots and just leave maybe just a few of them actually stark white. So I need to mix up a shadow colour, so I'm going to mix up a little bit of burnt sienna and some ultramarine. So we've got like a nice kind of browny shadow colour, just a little bit, we don't need much, because we're only covering a tiny little area, and just a really small round brush. This is a size 0. Now we'll start with the top ones because some of them, these are kind of some raised areas, so we'll just put a little bit of paint on there so that they are so that they'll show. And then I'm putting a little bit of paint across the bottom area, leaving a little white highlight. If it's too dark when it dries, we can lift some out or add a little bit of white paint over the top to bring that whiteness back out. Cover most of the white up and just leave a little fleck of white maybe across the top area. Now I think I've kind of overdone that a bit. They're sticking out a bit too much. They look a little bit too three-dimensional, so I will definitely be adding more white into that to try and flatten them down a little bit. So these ones here in shade, I'm just gonna literally not leave any white on these because they're in a shadow. I might actually add more red onto these because I think they're just a bit too much, so I might try and disguise some of this white by adding more red, especially here, this little one. I didn't intend on putting that much masking fluid on, but it kind of blobbed out everywhere, so I'll just cover a lot of that up. I'm just going back and forth, just trying to kind of alter them because that masking fluid just spread into like big clumps. Okay, I'm not really happy with the dots at all. I've tried to mend them a little bit. I'm just hoping it'll look okay at the end. I'm just going to add a little bit of white Posca onto some of them, and then maybe a few more little dots. Okay, I'm going to leave the dots for now, see if I need to make any alterations at the end, and I'm going to move on to the underneath of the mushrooms. I'm going to mix some burnt umber with some ultramarine. We've got a nice brown colour, but we don't want not too orange, and the ultramarine just tones that down a little bit. I'm going to very carefully wet just this area. So I'm using a smaller brush so that I can get in that small area. Then I'm going to get some of that colour that I've just made up, drop it in the corner here. Then I'm going to make a stronger version of that colour. So we've got burnt umber, much stronger, much more concentrated. with the small rigger brush and some of that strong paint, I'm going to paint some of the little kind of lines. Kind of here at this side, and then as you go further over, more curving this way, if that makes sense. So just gonna loosely put some of those in. Then add a little bit of water to your brush. Blend some of them out so they're not so harsh. Now I'm going to paint in the stalk, so I'm going to use the same colour. I'm going to get some of that and make it quite watery and just paint a layer over all of the stalk. So we'll just start with this one. I'm actually going to add just a touch more ultramarine into that colour because I just want it to be a little bit cooler. So we'll start with this one and we'll just put a light layer over the whole stalk. And I'm not going to cover it right to the bottom because we're going to have grass there, so I'm going to leave lots of white parts so we can put grass over the top. Then I'm going to get a little bit of the darker colour and just add some streaks like this, just to add a little bit of variety. Maybe get a little bit of ultramarine. Okay, just leave that, move on to the next one, just do the same for the others. So we'll just dry that off because that's just a base layer, and then we'll add more detail over the top. Okay, so I did another layer on top of the stalks and the camera wasn't recording, unfortunately, but I'll just tell you what I did. I added a little darker area here and then underneath here and then down the side, down the right hand side, and I did that for all of them. And now I'm going to add some really fine details to make the edges of those stalks stand out. So I'm going to make a really even darker brown to do that. So I'm going to get some of the burnt umber again. And this time I'm going to mix in some indigo. See if I can get a really dark brown. If I can't, I'll just have to find a different paint. I've got sepia, I think, in Daniel Smith. So I'll just see if I can make it myself. Okay, I think that looks like super dark. But before that, I'm just gonna get some of the red, and I'm gonna add some red across this bottom edge. Get this super dark brown, and I'm going to make a super thin line across here, just underneath the red, and we're going to go right over the top of this stalk here. Then down the side of here. Blend it out a little bit, just loosely. And down here. And then we want to make it really dark under here. And we'll make this side, this edge of this area dark on this part here, and blend it in a little bit with some water. So the stalk's a little bit dark, I don't want them to be that dark, so I'm going to use one of these little Eradicator brushes, like a little scrubbing brush, to lift out some of that colour. So I'm gonna put some clean water on the areas that I want to lighten a little bit, let that soften the paint a little bit, and then I can scrub some of it out. So I want these little bottom bits here to be lighter, and then down the left hand side of the stalk. So leave that water to settle, and I'll get a little bit of kitchen towel, and then just kind of scrub on that a little bit, especially the edges that would be sticking out and catching the light, and then dab on there to lift some of that back up. So I've got this little brush from Rosemary, in case you're wondering. I want to make this one lighter especially so that it stands out against the stalk that's behind. Okay, so that's those parts finished, and now I'm going to start on the little grassy area underneath. Use the rest of this brown, and I'm going to get some olive green and some permanent sap green, which is quite bright, much brighter green. I'm going to use some more orange as well. Okay, so I've got some of the brown colour, I've made it quite watery. I'm going to paint in some of that in kind of streaks, but then I'm going to alternate the colour, so then I'll get a little bit of olive green and do the same. Be dropping a little bit of the sap green as well. So I want it all to kind of like blend in. Get a little bit of the orange on. I'm going to move to this little small rigger brush and do some streaks of orange, but let them kind of blend into each other. A little bit tricky this part. I'm just going to keep alternating those colours. And do this right across the area. Make some long streaks of grass. Add some orange, just let it blend and then drag it across. Then I'm going to get the brown like really watered down and just dab it across. Then some green. And brown again. Then I've cleaned the brush, got some clean water on the brush, and I'm just going to drag across like this. Dry the brush off, lift some of that back out. So we want it to kind of like fade out to the sides like this. So we want it to be watery. Okay, I'm going to dry that, and then we'll add some wet on dry sprigs of grass over the top. So I'm going to get some of those colours on the brush. I'm going to really carefully draw some long blades of grass. Okay, I'm just going to add a few little final finishing touches. I've got an even smaller Eradicator brush, a really tiny one, and I'm going to lift out some longer white areas on these to make it kind of look like folds, just to give a little bit more details in the creases on those. So the last thing I'm going to do is make a few little splashes over the whole thing, just to add a few little dots. So I'll get some really watery paint. So I'll start with the red, like really watered down, and then just tap the brush to add a few spots, not too many. Do the same with the brown. And then the olive green. And I've got a tiny little bit of white gouache. I'm going to make that super watery, and then just do a little bit of that on as well. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it at that, call that done. I'm not happy with the spots, so if you want to make changes to your spots, if you're going to follow along, I wish I hadn't done that many spots and I made a bit of a mess. It doesn't look too bad, but I do wish I'd done better with the spots. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for watching. Remember, everything's listed below, and my next video will be up on Friday, hopefully, if I get it completed on time.